They set out chasing a shortcut. In the spring of 1846, a group of families left the settled world behind and pointed their wagons west, toward a place most of them had only heard about in letters and rumor, California, where the land was said to be green all year and a man could start his life over. They were not adventurers. They were farmers and merchants, husbands and wives, grandparents and infants. They carried furniture and books and seed for the crops they meant to plant. They were, in every way, ordinary people. By the following spring, nearly half of them were dead, and the survivors had done a thing that would attach itself to their name forever, a thing no one who left Illinois that spring could have imagined they were capable of. This is the story of the Donner Party. It is one of the most famous disasters in the history of the American West, and it is remembered almost always for its most horrifying detail. But the horror at the end was not a sudden madness. It was the last link in a long chain of small decisions, bad luck, and misplaced trust, each one reasonable at the time, each one narrowing the road behind them until there was no road left at all. To understand how it happened, you have to begin at the beginning, when the future still seemed wide open. The party took its name from two brothers, George and Jacob Donner, prosperous farmers from Illinois, and from a business partner named James Reed. They joined a great river of migration already flowing west along the established trail, thousands of wagons a season, following ruts worn deep into the plains by the people who had gone before. For the first weeks, it was hard but ordinary work, long days behind the oxen, river crossings, dust and heat, and the slow grinding progress of miles. If they had simply stayed on the known trail, most of them would have lived. But somewhere along the way, a book changed everything. A man named Lansford Hastings had published a guide for emigrants, and in it he described a new route. A shortcut, he claimed, that would cut hundreds of miles off the journey to California. It ran south of the established trail, through the mountains and across the desert, and Hastings promised it was faster and just as safe. What he didn't mention, because he had never actually traveled the full route himself with wagons, was that it ran through some of the most punishing terrain on the continent. At a fork in the trail, the party made its choice. Against the advice of others who warned them of it, they turned onto the Hastings Cutoff. It was the decision that doomed them. The shortcut was a catastrophe from the start. Where Hastings had described an open passage, they found dense forest and boulder-choked canyons. The men had to hack a road through the wilderness, felling trees and clearing, rock by hand, moving the wagons forward, sometimes only a few miles a day. What was supposed to save them weeks cost them weeks instead. Tempers frayed, the oxen weakened, and still ahead of them lay the worst of it. A vast salt desert that Hastings had crossed lightly on horseback and that nearly destroyed them. Out on the white flats, there was no water and no shade. Wagons bogged down in the crust. Oxen, mad with thirst, broke free and ran until they dropped. Families abandoned possessions they had carried 1,000 miles, furniture, wagons, keepsakes, simply to survive the crossing. When they finally reached the far side, they were battered, short of animals and supplies, and, most dangerously of all, far behind schedule. Because the mountains were waiting, and the mountains kept a calendar of their own. To reach California, the party still had to climb over the Sierra Nevada, a high, steep wall of granite that, in a normal year, closed under snow by the early winter. Every mile the shortcut had cost them was a mile closer to that closing gate. Seasoned travelers knew the rule without having to say it aloud. You crossed the Sierra before the snows came, or you did not cross at all. They arrived at the foot of the mountains in late autumn, exhausted, with the pass still ahead of them, and then it began to snow. It came early that year, weeks earlier than usual, and it came hard. When the party tried to push over the summit, they found the pass already choked with snow, deeper than the oxen could wade, deeper than the wagons could roll. They tried again and failed. The gate had closed, and the Donner Party, strung out in two groups along the eastern slope, realized the truth all at once. They were trapped on the wrong side of the mountains, with winter coming down on top of them. They built what shelter they could, rough cabins and lean-tos near a frozen lake, and a few miles back, brush shelters for the Donner families themselves. They killed the last of the oxen and tried to make the meat last, and they waited for a break in the weather that would let them climb out. The break did not come. The snow kept falling week after week until it lay deeper than a man is tall, burying the cabins to their roofs, sealing the trapped families inside a white and silent world. The food ran out. The animals were gone, down to the hides and the bones, and slowly, terribly, the thing they were truly fighting revealed itself. It was not the cold, though the cold was merciless. It was starvation, the long, patient hollowing out of the body, one day at a time. In December, a small group of the strongest set out on makeshift snowshoes to cross the mountains on foot and bring back help. They called themselves the Forlorn Hope. 15 people walking into the high Sierra in the dead of winter with almost nothing to eat. It took them a month. Many of them did not survive the crossing, and it was among that desperate group, lost in the snow with their food long gone, that the unthinkable first became thinkable. Faced with certain death, the starving turned to the only thing left. They ate the bodies of those who had already died. It is the detail that has followed the Donner Party through history, spoken in a whisper, made into a punchline by people who never had to sit in that snow. But strip away the sensation, and what remains is something far quieter and far more human. People at the absolute end of endurance, watching their children starve, making a choice that no one should ever be asked to make. In the camps by the lake, as the weeks stretched on and the last scraps disappeared, the same terrible line was crossed by others, not out of madness, out of the oldest instinct there is. Rescue, when it finally came in pieces. Word had reached the settlements in California that families were trapped in the mountains, and through the late winter and early spring, relief parties fought their way up into the snow again and again, each one able to bring out only a few survivors at a time. They found scenes that the rescuers would never speak of fully for the rest of their lives. They carried out the living, many of them children, wrapped and hollow-eyed, across the same brutal miles that had trapped them, and they buried, as best they could, the dead. Of the roughly 87 people who had been trapped in the mountains, only about half came down alive. The survivors went on to build the lives they had crossed a continent to find. Some of them prospered. Some of them lived into old age in the California they had nearly died to reach, but they carried it with them, all of them, the memory of that winter by the lake and the choices it had forced. Most of them refused, for the rest of their days, to speak of what had happened in the snow. Who could blame them? In the years after, People came looking for someone to blame, as people always do. They blamed the emigrants for their choices. They blamed Lansford Hastings for the shortcut he sold and never truly tested. They blamed the mountains and the early snow and simple, monstrous bad luck. And the truth is that all of it played a part, that a disaster this complete is never the work of a single mistake, but of many small ones laid end to end. There is a hard lesson in this story, and it is older than the West itself. It is that catastrophe rarely announces itself. It does not arrive as one great, obvious error that anyone could see coming. It arrives as a series of small, reasonable choices. A shortcut that seems clever, a warning that seems overcautious, a few days' delay that seems harmless, until you look up one morning and find that the road behind you has closed, and every option that remains is worse than the last. The people of the Donner Party were not fools, and they were not monsters. They were ordinary people who wanted a better life and who made, one at a time, decisions they believed were right. The mountains simply held them to account for all of them at once. They went west, chasing a shortcut, and the shortcut, in the end, was the longest road any of them would ever walk. The snow melted that spring, as it always does. The lake thawed. The mountains went green again, and the trail reopened, and the wagons rolled through the pass as if nothing had ever happened there. The high country keeps no grudges. It simply keeps the ones who stay too long.